think we're in for a wonderful hour tonight. We're talking with Elizabeth Terwilinger, who was recently named to the Marin Women's Hall of Fame, and who is known to families and children all over Marin as Mrs. T. And we want to find out all about Mrs. T, starting with her early life. Can you tell us something about your early life, where you were born and when?
My father was a doctor on a sugar plantation on the island of Oahu. The name of the plantation was Aiea, and it was the only plantation that refined white sugar. All of the sugar was sent up here to Carquinez, and then it was turned into white sugar. And many missionaries came through Honolulu on their way to the Philippines and Japan and India, and my mother loved meeting them, and she'd take them around the island, and then she'd bring them to the sugar mill and take them on a tour through the sugar mill. And this was just a lot of fun. And we had relatives. My parents came from Missouri, and we'd come up by boat to take trips to go see the relatives in Missouri.
You had two brothers?
I had two older brothers.
And your childhood apparently was a very happy one in this place.
On the plantation, sugarcane fields all and back. And to go to school, we had to walk down through the rice fields and the taro fields to catch the plane that went right beside Pearl Harbor. And then you got off the train and you ran to catch the streetcar that took you to school. And when you got to school, you had to walk a quarter of a mile, a half mile to the building your school was in. And then you had to be sure that you caught the 2:15 train or the 5:15. How else would you get home? Wow. And I used to wake up at night dreaming, running down to catch the train. And one of the biggest thrills of my life was to be able to walk to school. And I didn't get to do that till I was a senior in college.
Oh, my goodness.
As a matter of fact, I was running down the road. I was so happy. And so I said, can I give you a lift? No, I just love running down the road. I could run or walk to school.
Actually go on your own. How long did you live in Hawaii?
Right through college.
Right through college? Tell me a little about what you were like as a young girl.
My two older brothers, we would go out into the sugarcane fields, and my brother would cut the sugarcane, and then you peeled it, and then you sucked the juice, just like this, and then you walked through the sugarcane fields up to where the reservoirs were. You could play in the reservoirs because all the plantations were irrigated by the water just drifting down into the reservoir. And on the plantation, there was a hospital, and my father was the doctor of the hospital, and he had a Japanese man who was his assistant, and he had 3 daughters, the Japanese man did, and they became a nurse and a teacher and a doctor.
Oh, he does. That's
and then you have Portuguese people, you have Filipino people, you have Chinese people, you have Puerto Ricans, you have all nationalities, and it's just exciting to go out with people that are all different nationalities.
I'm getting the picture of you as a person who was already looking at nature and looking at everything around you when you were young.
We grew up reading stories about Freckles, the Uncle Remus stories about Bear Wolf, Bear Fox, Bear, but we didn't have any of those things in the islands. And Ernest Thompson Seton's book about what was the name of that book, Ernest? Wild Animals I Have Known. But these are all animals of this country. And when I came up here, I wanted to be a nurse. I came to Stanford School of Nursing. Well, we were given 3 weeks vacation our first year. I didn't want to go home. It was before airplanes, a week by boat, a week back. I'd been in the islands. I wanted to see this country. And I learned about Yosemite. And we went to Yosemite. Well, how was I going to get to Yosemite? Well, go on a bus. Where would you stay? There was a dormitory. Well, there was another student nurse that wanted to go to Yosemite, too, but she didn't have very much money. I had enough money to pay my bus fare. And she hitchhiked from San Francisco to Yosemite, and she got there within a half an hour of the time I got there. And we both stayed in the dormitory. And in the morning, you'd walk with a ranger naturalist. In the afternoon, you'd walk with a ranger naturalist. In the evening, there was a ranger naturalist program. They even fed the bears then, a long time ago. And you learned about the outdoors with people who loved it. And while we were at Yosemite, he would teach us the birds, and then we could go into the museum there, and we could see the birds that he'd been telling us about. And so it was just exciting because you heard the sound, you saw them for real, you'd seen their pictures for years in books, but we didn't have those. As a matter of fact, one interesting experience, I was asked to come over and talk to the students that had been out of school. And I have all my stuffed birds that I use to teach children with. And on the stage with me was a minor bird in a cage. I'm having the children do the flight patterns: V for vulture, straight out for a hawk, never in a hurry for a seagull, always in a hurry for a duck, bring the air to you for an egret and a heron, paddle overhand for a raven, a crow, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hold, and that's a bound pelican. Then he folds his wings and dives down to get a fish. But he gets too much water, you got to get it out. And then we do the bird
I've
calls.
seen you do these so many times.
Children just love it.
I know.
And then we hold up 5 fingers. Woo, 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 woo. That's a great horned owl. Then hold up 4 fingers. Woo, woo, woo. And in the midst of doing this with the children, the minor bird says, birds don't talk. Now, I grew up with minor birds. That's what we had in the islands.
And did they talk on the islands?
They never talked in the islands. And suddenly there was a minor bird in a cage saying, birds don't talk. The children just laughed and laughed and laughed.
Mrs. T, you said that you went to nursing school. Had that been your dream, to be a nurse?
I always wanted to be a nurse. My brother was a doctor, my father was a doctor, my grandfather was a doctor. I wasn't smart enough to be a doctor. But I wanted to be a nurse. Did you want to be a doctor? No. No, I wanted to be a nurse.
You always wanted to be a nurse?
I always wanted to be a nurse. But they said, no, you have to. My mother made me major in home economics. And I hated it. She used to make me come in.
Where was that, in college?
Well, yes. Because I used to play ball with my brothers all the time, and all the kids in the neighborhood came and we'd play ball. You come in, you've got to learn how to bake a cake, or fix a chicken, or do some work on the furniture and stuff. I didn't want to learn how to do all of that. Because one of the things I tell the mothers is, if you stay home, you'll never remember when you wash the windows, polish the furniture, and scrub the floor. But if you go in the outdoors, you'll never forget what you saw that day.
You did become a nurse?
Oh, yes.
And then how did you...
Well, I met my husband there.
Yeah, okay. Where? At Stanford?
At Stanford, You have to take surgical nursing and medical nursing, and then you're in obstetrics, and you have all the phases of nursing. And then the last thing we had was private duty. I'd never been in the private duty area before. I'd always been in the clinics and in the little other rooms where you had beds and beds and beds and beds. But suddenly here were people with their own bedrooms. And then there was a little lady there. She'd had a stroke. She was paralyzed on this side. She just lay there. She didn't have a radio. She hadn't anything to walk with. She had no frame to help her turn over with. Now, wait a minute. We've been in orthopedic clinics and seen all the apparatus they've given to people to help them turn over. Well, this lady's husband was a doctor. He was an obstetrician. And I called him. I said, please, your mother is here. She needs a little radio. So we got it. Because one hand was okay. So with her little radio, she could have something to listen to while she was just lying there. And then how would she turn over? I said, well, let's give her a frame so she could turn over. Why don't we try letting her walk? I could get her in a wheelchair. So I went down to the carpenter shop. I always like to get things done. And I had the carpenter make one of those little wooden horse things and make a smooth little handle so that if you use a cane, it's too wobbly. But having like a horse that has 4 feet, she could walk.
Sounds like you were before your time.
Well,
we see those things in hospitals all the time. Well, you met your husband there?
Oh, yes. As a matter of fact, in the orthopedic clinic. We've been in the eye clinic and the surgical clinic and all the other clinics, but we hadn't been in the orthopedic one. His uncle was the orthopedic chief, and he was tired of having student nurses in there. He wanted to train nurses in there, but he was away on a vacation. So I said, I have not had orthopedic nursing. I want to try this in the clinic. So I met my husband there. He was a very handsome, tall young man.
Oh, he's a very handsome
And
older man, too. We want to get you from nursing to being Mrs. T, the naturalist, although I can see you were heading there from a very early time.
Well,
so just tell us about how it all happened.
When I was a nurse at Stanford, there was no point in going home. I went up to Yosemite. When you walk to the Ranger Naturalist. They have a program at Yosemite that for a whole week you can go with the Ranger Naturalist. And to be a whole week with somebody who knows about the out of doors. I was so thrilled. And then when I came back to Stanford, and, well, I met my husband. We went on these field trips around here, and we would, once in a while, we could rent a bicycle and go out Gate Park all the way to the ocean and back. Well, he wanted to major in orthopedic surgery. And so you had to go back to New York City to do this. So we went back to New York City. We drove all the way across the United States. And to drive across our country, whose name you know by geography lessons, well, there's the Mississippi River. Oh, and there are all the mountains. Now, that's Florida. Then you listen to the voices of the people. And so that you finally get, where did you come from? Which part of the United States did you come from? Then we went back to the East Coast. Well, then you have a little apartment, and when you look out, what do you see? More apartments and streets with not many trees on. Well, he had to work in the hospital, and I got a job in what is a community service society in an Italian district area. And these were just 4 little rooms that the people would live in. and they'd come out in the street and no trees. And I said, wait a minute, let's have trees. And you go closer to the big park, Central Park, lots of trees over there, with big houses over there have trees. I want trees along here where all these people live so they can see things. And then they have a daycare center there, and then they have a swimming pool, and they have exercises for the people in the neighborhood to come and do things. And it was just exciting. And right nearby was the river that separated Long Island from New York City. And there were ferry boats, and there were bridges, and there was the Brooklyn Bridge. Did you ever walk across the Brooklyn Bridge? Oh, it's a thrilling experience to walk across the bridge and all the other bridges. And then you heard about Coney Island? Well, then they had subways in, and subways in are only 5 cents. So you had your nickel, and you put your nickel in. Let's go to Coney Island. And you go to Coney Island. Well, one of the thrilling pieces about places in Marin County are all of our beaches. And at Coney Island, there were so many people you could hardly see the sand. But it was kind of exciting. And then later they built another big Jones, a big park. And you got to go to Jones Beach. And, oh, that was just beautiful. And then over at Brooklyn, they have the Brooklyn Botanical Museum. And every Saturday for 6 weeks, the man in charge of their botanical gardens took you on a field trip around that whole area. Well, over there you have seasons in New York City. We don't have seasons really here like they have in the East. And so he would take us to different places, and he'd go up to a tree and hug it and just love it. And, and then you would feel the bark, and you would look at the leaves, and then you would listen to the wind in the leaves, and which trees are going to lose their leaves. And, well, I was walking along the big park that's by the Hudson River, and there was a tree that was had lost its leaves, and look at the shape of it. So I said to somebody, could you tell me what that tree is? How can I tell it doesn't have any leaves? Every tree has a shape. Who is it going to be? And so this is one of the fun things we do with the children now. Which of these trees loses its leaves? Now, there's a tree that has rounded leaves like this, and one that has pointed leaves like this, and I thought, now I'll figure this out. If it's pointed like this, W will be for white, and if the leaves are rounded like this, it will look like a B, it will be for black, but it's just the reverse.
Oh. Well, you could keep that straight, I'm sure. Well, then, did you decide that you wanted to be a nature guide when you got such pleasure?
Well, when you work in hospitals, you see all the people with all their different problems, the blind people, the deaf people, the people with injuries, and to take them in wheelchairs in the out of doors and let them listen. And you go into the retirement homes and people are just sitting like this. But if you put them by a window and they know the flight patterns of the birds and the calls, I take the stuffed birds and animals that I have into the retirement homes, and I put the birds on their laps and have them imitate. And they'll say, oh, I remember on the ranch, I remember on the farm, and just watching their faces light up for a few minutes. And by the windows, yes, I saw the turkey vulture fly by. I saw the hawk fly by. It gives them a whole new interest in the outdoors and in life.
And did you do that as a nurse?
Well, this little lady that had this paralysis, one of the things was, we couldn't go back to New York Orthopedic Hospital for a year because the appointment was a year later. And so my husband went down to Salinas, and along the Salinas Valley are several little towns and hospitals. And he then would relieve the different doctors at their little cities so they could go on a vacation. And so then this is how we went all down by Monterey. When we were at the Stanford School of Nursing for 2 years, my room looked out on the cement wall. The third year, I had a room up on the 3rd floor. And I looked out, and there was Mount Tamalpais. Oh, I wanted to live over there. Well, when I was growing up, there was a young boy that came from San Francisco to live with his grandmother because his parents had died. And he brought me a picture, that famous picture that you see of Mount Tamalpais with some poppies and stuff. And I thought, that's where I want to live. And having taken the student nurses and medical students, let's go hike on this, I want to live there. Well, we hunted all over Marin County for a place to live, from Fairfax all the way down. We found a little house in Sausalito, just a tiny little house sort of underneath a bridge. We couldn't see the mountain, and I made friends with the man in charge of the hardware store. Miss Terwilinger, from my house, I can see the mountain, and if there's snow on it, I'll call you. And so he called me, I took the children, and we went up the mountain, and we ate snow and ate snow and ate snow, and it was just a lot of fun.
That's wonderful. At one point, you left Sausalito and went to Mill Valley, didn't you? Because
well, the thing was, we had 5 years in Sausalito and Hurricane Gulch. And just before my daughter was born, I went over and I took some classes in ceramics over in San Francisco, in the Marina District. And the teacher said she used to teach ceramics at Tamalpais High School, and she lived in Hurricane Gulch, because that's what it was called. And she says, you never have to clean the house in hurricane gulls. You open the back door and you open the front door and the wind goes...
Sounds wonderful.
So that was hurricane gulls. And so then I thought, we had 5 years of that. Now, something special. When we lived in Hurricane Gulch, well, it was cold and windy. Well, we'd walk up to meet Calvin coming home from the hospital because he was working at Sanford Hospital then. And we'd put our hats, warm hats on and warm sweaters on, which would come over to San Rafael, and it would be warm, and people would be walking around in cotton shirts. Gosh. And then the hill, well, there was a hill in back of our house, a mountain, and the sun went over at 2:30 in the winter and 4:30 in the summer, and you'd look out and there'd be all that sun. Well, let's see if we can't find a place that gets more sun. So we went over to Strawberry, and Strawberry was mostly just grassy hills then, and we found a spot on top of the hill. Well, we had gone to Frank Lloyd Wright's place, and he said, before you build anything and you pick your site, look all around and build your house accordingly. So we found a young man, and he built our house in sort of a spiral form so you could see the view all the way around. But I wanted to look at Mount Tamalpais. He had me facing San Francisco. I didn't want to look at San Francisco. I lived there for 3 years. I didn't want to see that. No, he said, it's beautiful over there. But the sun would come up like this, and not only would it be in your face, but it would be on the water, so you had the sun to fight on the water in the sky all day long, this way. Well, I stood it for 3 years. And then I looked over and I saw Tamalpais High School. Someday my kids are going to have to go there. How will they get there? Well, they hadn't built that bridge yet. Then they built the bridge, but how do you get across the bridge? They'd have to go clear around this way, down this hill, and way over around there. Well, no, let's move to Mill Valley. So we moved to Mill Valley. As a matter of fact, a long time ago we had what was called a junior museum. And I love taking children there. As a matter of fact, as our children are growing up, there was what was called the Marin Nature Group. And they met the second Fridays every month at the College of Marin. And they went on a field trip the following Sunday, and they took whole families. Well, I took my kids when they were little. My husband went because he'd always been so busy working. He never had time to learn about the outdoors. And he learned about the outdoors, and the children learned. And then when I went to the junior museum, I would take the mothers and their little children on field trips on Fridays and in the morning. And then the bigger kids, when they came home from school, they would say, how come my little brother and sister know so much? They don't go to school yet. And then this would teach the mother where to go with her family in the out-of-doors. There's nothing more wonderful than taking your whole family in the out-of-doors.
Now, let me ask you, you then did not continue working as a nurse because you had the family now.
Well, the thing was, when we were in New York City, I had the preschool children to look after, and I would go into the homes. And these people would be from Italy and France, but mostly Italians, and they didn't all speak English. And so the little children would be in the little nursery school, and I would go into their homes and teach them about American and having made it nutrition, what they should be feeding their kids. Because there was one young boy who had been very, very skinny, and then during the war he went into the war and he got all different food, and he came out real big and real husky. So nutrition is what's important.
Did you teach that as an employee of the city or as
no?
a
This was it was community services district like we have here in Marin County, and so they had this building which brought the people in of all different nationalities to give them the chance where they could have exercises, they could have games, they could have classes, they could do artwork or carpentry work. So it gave them skills to do because they just lived in these little tiny boxy houses, and it was just exciting.
Did you take those children on nature walks? Or
no.
When did you start doing the nature walks?
No, it was just that after going with the rangers up in Yosemite, and then coming to Marin County and knowing the nature group, then I said I will take children on field trips because as you major in home economics, you learned about daycare centers. And here are children whose parents work all day. And during the war, when we were in the East Coast, my husband was at New York Orthopedic Hospital, and then the war came, and he had to go down to Walter Reed Hospital in Washington, D.C. So while he was at Walter Reed, I had a daycare center. And I had the children from 8 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon, more hours than their parents had. Their parents just fed them and put them to bed. But here were these children, and I would take them for walks in the out-of-doors, and it was just beautiful. Then you had to learn about snakes because, well, I had learned something very special about snakes.
And you continued that kind of work when you got out here then, I take
When
it?
I came out here, then I would work with the little children.
Was this through any particular organization, or did you just do it yourself? Did you just say, hey, I'll take you on walks?
That's what I wanted to do.
And you certainly
Yes.
did. How long ago did you start doing
Well, when my kids were little, when they were 2 and 4 years old. Because my husband went to the city every day. He was a doctor. You had to see your patients every day. And I would take the mothers from the Junior Museum. And when we formed the Junior Museum, how were we going to support the Junior Museum? Well, I lived in Sausalito, and there were people in Mill Valley and people in Strawberry and people all over the county. And we would raise money and give to the Junior Museum. And then something very special. One of the students said, Miss Terwilinger, would you lead a field trip of students on their bicycles down to Sausalito and underneath the Golden Gate Bridge and tell us about the birds and the plants and the seaweeds that are there? Well, yes, but wait a minute. I had a friend who wanted to ride her bicycle down to Sausalito. She got as far as the Buckeye restaurant, and the officer said, you can't go any further. What do you mean I can't go any further? Well, she says, I want to go to Sausalito, and I want to go. If you go, I will sue you. Because over there it said railroad track, no trespassing. Here it said was the highway, no bicycles, no pedestrians. And here was a hill. But wait a minute. Here was Sausalito. Here was Marin City. Here was Tamalpais High School that they had to go to. How are they going to get there? Well, I better do something about this. So I went to the Caltrans department in San Francisco. I said, I want the bicycle path so kids from Sausalito and Marin City can get to the high school. Well, we understand that is a problem. We not quite sure how to. We also have a problem. We live over by the Civic Center, and we need to bicycle over to San Rafael, and we can't get there. There's no way. Why don't we work on that? Oh, so I called the highway department. I called the railroad department. I called the school boards. I called the city council. And let's meet under the Richardson Bay Bridge, because right where the railroad goes, and the trains are going there now, I want a bicycle path. So we got the bicycle path going back and forth. And one lady says, oh, Miss Terwilinger, I'm so glad, because it used to cost me $1 a day to send my children to school. You should be able to walk to school or ride your bicycle to school. And what was interesting, when I went to see who else I should talk to, well, how about the police department over here in Larkspur? Well, they said, Miss Terwilinger, we know you've got a problem. We want to do something about it. You need to talk to the judge. So I talked to the judge, and one of the judges, he went to high school, at Tamalpais High School years ago. So he got in and he helped us, and we got the bicycle path. Now, supposing you're a student at Tamalpais High School and you want to go to a football game over here or a football game over at San Rafael High School, how are you going to get there? 17 curves up to Corte Madera, 18 curves down. Because you're not old enough to drive a car yet. That's a lot of curves. Well, right beside the freeway, between Mill Valley and Corte Madera, there's a piece of an old road. So I wrote to Caltrans, let's do something about this. So now you can bicycle right beside the highway. And I said, I want a white line right down in the middle of it. Why? Because it's important in a car, you know what a white line stands for. And here you know what a white line stands for. Because sometimes when you come down the hill, guys are coming fast, and you need to know what's right. Now, let's see, you want to go to San Rafael High School, you can go across the Greenbrae Bridge, you get over by San Quentin, and there's a sign that says, no pedestrians, no bicycles. Now, wait a minute, let me try this. So I took my bicycle and I went down past San Quentin to where you can go into San Quentin that way, and then the road goes underneath the freeway, underneath the Richardson San Rafael Bridge there, Richmond Bridge, and then you can go right up on East Francisco Boulevard. Now, when you come back, now let's see, there is a fence here, but this road that comes up this way is wide enough. There'll be a bicycle path there. Now, who do I write to? Whose property is this? Larkspur, San Rafael, Caltrans. I'll write to all of them. So you can now, the word pedestrians and bicyclists, rather, is deleted, and you can ride your bicycle all the way. Now, supposing you live on a
wait a minute. I'm going to interrupt you. I know that when Mrs. Terwilinger sees a problem, that she attacks it head on. And one of the questions I was going to ask you was if you had ever had any obstacles in your life that you had found it difficult to overcome. And I'm beginning to suspect that there weren't any.
Well, you know the expression, where there's a will, there's a way. And if at first you don't succeed, try again. What do all these things mean?
Mrs. T, I know that you could give us stories all night long about how you were able to get bike paths and boating facilities. I have seen you in a canoe in the most unexpected places and in bicycles way, way out in West Marin. Tell us, because I'm so afraid we'll run out of time, about the program that you have been able to establish with your nature teaching. How many children you have reached and what some of the facets of the program are. I know there is a whole nature education center named after you. I know that you take thousands of school children on tours now. Can you give us some dimension now of what that program has become?
Well, a long time ago, this friend came with her 2 little children, and she was so thrilled with this program. She said, let's make movies of these. So we have made 5 movies with the children in the outdoors. Saltwater marsh, woods with a stream, the ocean, the chaparral, and the oak woodland area. And as the children see these movies before they come on the field trips with us, then when a child says to me, I'm not afraid how to pick up a crab, I saw how you did it in the movie. Knowledge dispels fear. And by seeing the movies before they come on their field trips, they know what to expect. Because one thing that happens now, look at that dirty sand on my hand. What am I doing with that dirty sand on my hand? I get this a lot from children. Sand isn't dirty. Here's that. Well, the mothers will say, what's important now is the car. I don't want any of that sand or that dirt in my car. What are our values? Where do you go with your family? The outdoors belongs to all of us. When we came here, there were no county parks, no state parks, no national parks. Mrs. Livermore was a marvelous person in our county. She called a group of us together. Let's study what needs to be done. I had the age group from 12 on down. Others had a different age group. So this is why we then created county parks and state parks and national parks. And I educated the Sonoma County PTA and Marin County PTAs to the importance of having the whole Point Reyes National Seashore. Because there was a wonderful lady that lived in Oakland. She came over and she took a movie from the Golden Gate Bridge all the way out to Point Reyes to show how beautiful this land was, that it should be all of ours. And then Dr. Joel Gustafson, who was one of the men that took us on our Marin nature groups when our kids were little, he went back with Boyd Stewart, who grew up here as a ranchman, and they took this wonderful movie back to President Kennedy. And in this movie, he showed the row on row of houses like they have in San Francisco. Do we want this here? No. Well, you don't want to miss anything. No. What are these for? And what are these for? And this. And now what are we doing? And this. But do you taste every plant that you see? Do you touch every plant that you see? Don't you need to know what you can do? Do you pick up just any snake that you can see? Now, something special. Got 1 more minute?
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think we have any more time, but I think you've taught us all something tonight about what we have to do. We have to watch and look and smell and taste, and we have to remember that there's a lot that's something special around us. Right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Beth Ashley, and I'm here today interviewing Mimi Farina, the Executive Director of Bread and Roses, and one of the first women who was elected to the Marin County Women's Hall of Fame. Mimi, it's just fun as can be talking to you again. I'm going to ask you a few kind of housekeeping questions about your life.
So, that's an impertinent question.
Well, I hope so. We'll get to those later.
I'm ready for anything.
Good, super. Well, can we just start with the simple ones like where were you born and when were you born?
That's easy. That I can deal with, I think. Yes, I was born in Palo Alto, Stanford Hospital in 1945, and
tell me about your family.
I lived in Palo Alto for 3 years. My father was at that time at Stanford University, and I have 2 older sisters. And we moved quite a bit from West Coast to East Coast to Baghdad, Iraq, to Paris, to Switzerland. My father worked for UNESCO as well as was a professor of physics. So between those 2 jobs, there was a lot of traveling.
How did you like that?
I think that it had... it broadened my view of life in general, but for me, I was a shy person, so it was hard for me to make friends in school, and I think it made my schooling very unpleasant for me. I think some kids adapt. I think if I had been an Army brat with a lot of other Army kids moving to and fro, there would have been at least a social circle to be in, but there wasn't. So I often felt pretty isolated.
What kinds of schools did you go to? Native schools, or were you in American
public schools? And when in Europe, in Baghdad, I was 5 years old, and so me and my 2 sisters attended a one-room classroom for all the American-speaking children who were there at the time, and that included Japanese, Chinese, French, British kids. And the age range was 5 to, I guess, my oldest sister was 11 or 12 at the time. So that was unique, to say the least. It was also a Catholic convent. And the rest of the school was filled with Arab children being raised in a Catholic convent. Very different, very unique, and pretty unpleasant. The nuns I found to be not warm-hearted, and I had some unpleasant experiences right off the bat with learning, which set me off on a bad foot in terms of being able to feel comfortable in a classroom. And then lots of travel, and by the time I hit high school and was in Paris, my 2 older sisters were away from the family by then, and I was sort of gleeful to have the parents to myself, but discovered that I didn't want to face another classroom. So finished the last 2 years of school barely at home. And should have had a
tutor? Or?
No, I was supposed to, but it wasn't provided, so I am still wondering how I ever did that. It was not comfortable, it was a strain, and I'm not a good learner from books. So that part of my life was not pleasant.
That's interesting. Well, since you were traveling around a great deal with your family must have been very central to your life. Can you tell us something about your family life? We all know about your sister, but I know you have a very powerful father and a very powerful mother. Can you tell us about them?
What were they like? They're very powerful.
Yeah.
They're interesting, unique individuals. Yes, I think we became quite a unit, and in that regard also became not so involved socially with the world around us. Sometimes I think of us as the way rock and roll bands travel. They become a little family of their own, but also isolated and separate from their audiences and from the people they deal with. And I see that our family was often like that too. We traveled as this little pack of people who became very intertwined and didn't reach out a lot. My mother is not outgoing, and my father is, but he had his work to go to. So I didn't get introduced to a lot of my surroundings easily. Mother likes to write and is a good writer, and in these years has been paying more attention to that, spending time realizing its importance. She says she likes to write for the pleasure of it, and certainly not to publish. That doesn't interest her, and I try to change that attitude because I think it's important that she be acknowledged.
Who was the head of the household? Was your mother or your father?
I think as far as I was concerned, my mother.
Your mother. And what was your relationship to her?
What do you say? mom, and I saw more of my father. She had a loving, supporting mother.
Yes, very much so. And I think went out of her way. As I say, she's not outgoing, so it must not have been simple for her when we traveled to establish her kids in the new setting. And I am aware that in every single move, she went out of her way to get on a bus or on a train or subway or whatever was necessary to get me to either music or dance school. And that is really what saved my life. I really was not happy in school. Spent most of the time crying and feeling that I couldn't keep up, but it was music that saved.
Well, that's what we need to talk about, don't we? Tell us about the music and the dancing. How important was that, and what did you see for yourself in that field?
It was certainly central to my life, and I had taken, I think all three of us were given piano lessons. And I think that my oldest sister, Pauline, was the most proficient at piano. None of us liked to practice. We all imitated Pauline, hating to practice.
She was a great role model for you.
Yes. But I realized in the third or fourth grade, a test was given to all the kids, public school, Southern California. And anyone who passed whatever it was that you could hear on key, or I don't know what the criteria was, you were allowed to choose an instrument and join the orchestra. Or band, I think it was called band. And I passed, and I came home and announced that I was going to take the violin, much to everybody's surprise, and my own included. And that's probably because my mother played a lot of classical music, used to get library records and bring them home. My father had a great hi-fi set, being a physicist and interested in gadgets. They always had a good sound system in the house. Maybe I had been inspired by that, and perhaps by the kind of romantic picture that my grandfather on my father's side played the violin and had serenaded my grandmother with the violin.
Did you then take the violin?
I did, and I loved it, and I was quite good. Having the skill in my fingers made the guitar a snap.
Did you take up the guitar then?
Yes. Great delight. We moved back east, and it was just when the folk craze was beginning. And I could play better than my sister and better than my friends. And I couldn't resist.
How old were you then?
11, 12.
Oh.
Yeah. So it was easy to learn and fun to learn, and I felt proficient, and that was exciting.
Well, were you and your sisters singing at that point? Were you singing with the guitar, or you were just playing?
I think learning the current folk songs of the day, Freight Train, and the songs that everybody else was learning how to figure out on the guitar, you'd play and sing at the same time. No, we were not a family who collected around the piano and all put our arms around each other and sang. There was plenty of hostility early on, and it was seldom that it was a natural thing to do, to get together and sing.
Tell us about hostility.
I don't want to begin.
And was there rivalry between you sisters? Among you sisters?
Sure.
Always?
Yeah. When I practiced the violin, they made fun, and I'd go in the bathroom and cry. Always not a terribly supportive gang, which was, as I look at it now, a surprise, because we look like such a perfect family. And people often think that we are, and it's not the case. I don't think it's the case in any family, but...
No. Do you think that rivalry was a controlling factor in your life?
Absolutely, and I also think, now that you mentioned the word control, that it was a result of who was in control and who wasn't, who was doing what, and what were we supposed to be doing, and where were the limits and the boundaries, and where did it all fall appropriately, and there were some real questions about that.
Well, we have not said in this interview so far that your older sister is the famous folk singer Joan Baez, and certainly we have to talk about that, but I'd like to talk...
Do we have to?
I think it's relevant. If you don't think it's relevant, we don't need to, but I would like to talk about the fact that at one point, I believe, you had hoped to be a dancer. When did that start?
I think when I was 2 or 3. I had an aunt who is now in the Redwoods, has just moved in, and I'm very happy there, who was a dancer, and used to teach dance and take me to her classes to watch. And I think she put me in one of her productions when I was 3 or 4. And it was a thrill. I loved stealing the show. I could have done anything, and it looked fun and great because I was so tiny. but I really did fall in love with dancing and studied all my life. Even the nuns in Baghdad had a ballet class with their big, huge shoes and their skirts down to the floor, teaching us the 5 steps. That was a riot.
Sounds as though you've been a performer all your life.
Maybe, maybe so.
Did you consciously seek attention as a performer, or was it just an art thing for you that you needed to express yourself?
I think the attraction of dance was showing off. Was twirling around and getting people to look at me. And the feel of it was wonderful. The best dance teachers I ever had were Russian, and really gave me the sensation of dance that I loved so much. It was a very vital feeling. And even today, when I feel most alive and most comfortable with myself is during aerobics. It's the motion and the activity and the adrenaline, and I feel comfortable there because of previous training.
How long did you pursue dance, and what cut it off for you?
I pursued through high school, and in Paris, the last 2 years of high school in Paris, I was in a troupe that actually went to Germany and performed. And then there was a choice, where to go, what to do with my life. And I was really too frightened to go off to school. I knew that I had learning problems. I knew that I felt isolated. And I met this great guy named Richard, who was a poet, and wanted to marry me.
Where did you meet Richard?
In Paris.
In Paris?
Yeah. It was very fairy tale and romantic. And he made music and poetry and wrote books and was very, very funny, which I've always appreciated with any friend in my life. So the choices between being in a studio during the day, performing at night for very little money as a dancer, that's a really tough life. Or maybe trying to sing or use my musical, didn't know what direction that